Welcome to RotoWire Fantasy Football Live, coming at you 5 days a week, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, off on Wednesdays and Thursdays. If you missed the live show, you can always catch the replay on RotoWire YouTube. Brandon Kravitz will be coming in at the bottom of the hour to go through waivers. Last time Brandon will be on this season. And then on Christmas Day and New Year's Day, those are Mondays. We will not be doing shows. So on those Tuesday shows, we'll do our reaction show with Anthony Servino those Tuesdays. We will go through the NFL playoffs. We'll continue to rock. Even if you're not doing fantasy, you want to just break down the games, maybe DFS, maybe gambling, or maybe just you enjoy football and love football. So we'll talk that. All right, everybody, Monday Night Football. Drew Lock pulls off the upset in the last minute against the Philadelphia Eagles. It took a long last drive of the game to get Lock over 200 yards. Lock did not throw an interception in this game. He ends up getting the game-winning touchdown to Jackson Smith-Njigba. We did like the over on the prop for Smith-Njigba. It did not look good until there was about 30, 40 seconds left in the game, right around there. And that long catch got him over that 41.5. It even went up to 45.5, but he got 48 with the touchdown. But the targets, Tyler Lockett was the most inefficient of the group. 8 targets, caught 3 for 21 yards. He missed Geno Smith. DK Metcalf almost had a forgettable game, but the last drive caught about 3 passes, and it got him to 12.8 PPR points, so that worked out for him. But, it was all confusing with Geno Smith because earlier before the game it said he'd be active, and then we found out that, Drew Lock is going to start, although Geno is active, so that was crazy. But Kenneth Walker facing a very good Philadelphia run defense, but maybe it's been overrated. Maybe it's coming down to earth a little bit. We saw Dallas with signs of life against them, and James Cook did pretty well against them, and Kenneth Walker, 19 carries for 86. Now, the snaps, when you look at the snaps between Walker and Charbonnet, they were close. 56% for Walker, 44% Charbonnet. But the workload, no comparison. 19 carries and 3 targets for Walker, 4 carries and 1 target for Charbonnet. So this is where the snap count sometimes does not tell the true story. The box score hunting in this case tells 2 tales. Charbonnet's on the field, but it seems to be pass protection, right? If they're passing and he's in the game and he's in for pass pro, that's a different ballgame. So you're getting significant snaps, but you're not getting the ball. So we'll be careful with that, right? Otherwise, that was Kenneth Walker's second best fantasy game of the season. He had 20.2 PPR points. Now, he was great through week 7. Up to that point, he had at least 13 PPR points in 5 or 6 games, but nicked up since, missed a little time. But in 4 of his last 6 games, he had been held to single-digit PPR points. So this 20-point outburst, if you use him in the fantasy playoffs, was awesome. I see Brian Upton's in the house. Appreciate you, Brian. Thanks for reminding people to hit that like and subscribe button if you're on RotoWire YouTube. Appreciate you being here. See, we got a bunch of people in the house. Glad you're here. Thank you for making this part of your day. Zach Charbonnet. That was his worst game since week 1. We just mentioned the 4 carries for 16 and the 1 short reception. His last 2 games, 5.8 and 1.6. Now, remember, he had bigger numbers because Kenneth Walker missed time. So, obviously, he went into a lead role, had a lot of volume. So, that explains why the recent numbers were better. And now he's a clear, in terms of touches, very, very distant number 2. Again, snaps are close, but distant. Now, Metcalf, it was an average game for him. He only has double-digit PPR point. I mean, he does. I should say this. He hit double digits in all but 2 games this year, but he's hit 20 only twice. So he's been that, solid play, gets you points most weeks. He had the 1 game he went off, but those games haven't been there. He's not been the player to go off. He's been, high floor, reasonable ceiling play all year. So that's kind of what you got on him. And then Tyler Lockett. Well, Geno Smith's been banged up. And now we got Drew Lock, but Tyler Lockett has single digits PPR points in 8 of 14 games. So overall, we say, obviously he's aged very well. He's still playing at a level, but when you brought Smith-Njigba into the fold, seeing some targets. Now Lockett's getting decent targets, but the production just hasn't been there. But Smith-Njigba, 12 to 16 PPR points in 5 of his last 9. Now he also obviously, And for the last 6, he hasn't been great, single digits in those. But over the course of the season for a rookie playing as a third receiver in a heavy 2 tight end based offense, it's been a very promising season for Jackson Smith-Njigba. And it would seem likely that maybe Tyler Lockett's not with the team next year, one way or the other. And if that's the case, Smith-Njigba moves into a prominent role. Be exciting for him and fantasy investors. Eagles, wow. They had the win. They definitely had the win here until the last drive. And they played it reasonably smart. Jalen Hurts was supposedly very ill, but he ran for 82 yards and 2 touchdowns. So there's that. He had a big run on the last drive of the game when they tried to get in the field goal range. Didn't work out. He threw the pick on that one. But 17 of 31 through the air. 17 of 31. No touchdowns, 2 picks, 143 yards. Now for fantasy, he's great. Gets it done for fantasy because obviously those 82 and 2 touchdowns right there, that's 20 points. So he banks it for fantasy. So there's no worries there. DeAndre Swift, we mentioned this before yesterday's game. He had low volume in the last 2 games because he's not the passing down back. They trailed in their last 2 games, San Francisco and Dallas. And when they trail, Gainwell plays more. But this was a game, obviously, until the last seconds, Philly was in a tight or lead. And in that case, Swift gets 18 carries, 74 yards. Still not a factor in the passing game. 3 targets, 2 catches for 1 yard. So Swift has fewer than 10 PPR points in his last 4 games and 5 of his last 6. That's rough because he gets the yardage. Now, we know those 2 games he was game scripted out, though. That's a real thing, right? But the schedule down the stretch, got the Giants twice in Washington. Game script should not be an issue. Shouldn't be an issue. So I think you start him with confidence down the stretch. But otherwise, on the season, Swift will frequently get you 14-ish points. He'll get you in that range frequently. But again, the last recent stretch, not so hot. It was really through weeks 2 through 8 when he was putting up those big 14-ish point games. But again, that's really slowed down. So again, he's a floor play, a solid floor play. With so few running backs cashing each week, you definitely got him working. George, thank you so much for that those kind words. I appreciate you greatly. Thank you. And A.J. Brown, no 20-point PPR games in his last 6. And think about that. No 20-point PPR games in his last 6. He had 5 in the first 8 games of the season. Now, 2 of his worst 3 games since the Week 10 bye. The competition's definitely stepped up. There is definitely more competition. You got 49ers. You got Dallas focusing on him. So they're mitigating factors. But I still get to the point. The Eagles, miss Shane Steichen. Randy, I appreciate you too, man. Appreciate you very much. Shane Steichen is a genius. And I throw that word around a lot. I too much, probably. Sean McVay is. Shane Steichen, I think he's in that group. You see what he's doing with the Colts. The Colts are putting up points every week with Gardner Minshew. Michael Pittman's great. Love Michael Pittman. But every week, Shane Steichen gets it done. And we saw last year, he painted a masterpiece with the Eagles. The way he blended the run and the pass game. That's not here. That's not here. Right now, Brian Johnson, it's a very broken offense in terms of flow. There's no flow to that offense. And sometimes Hurts will throw a hero ball up to A.J. Brown, go win. But plays aren't stacked. Concepts aren't built on one another. They're good at understanding to bleed the clock when they have a lead. They're very good at that. Now, Diontate Smith, just like last year, his numbers are getting better lately. Now, some of that coincided with Dallas Goedert being out. When Goddard was out, it was a 2-man game instead of a 3-man game. So Smith is getting funneled more targets. So understand that to be on point. But understand that Diontate Smith had 4 single-digit PPR games in his first 7. Now he's at least 12 in 6 of his last 7. So now, like I said, but again, a lot coincided with Goddard, but his targets are up. And defenses, again, they're playing the better defenses recently, and they are aggressively trying to limit A.J. Brown. And by doing that, it does make the sledding much easier for Diontate Smith. And Dallas Goedert, Obviously, you're starting him. He's a floor play every week, but he only has 2 games with 10 PPR points. He had a 25 in week 5 and 18 in week 7. And he had the floor is this. He has at least 7 PPR points in 9 of his last 10, but it hasn't been big games. So sometimes a tight end, you're looking for an answer. He's a floor, and that's it. I mean, it's not exciting. He could come up with a game, but with the way the offense is functioning right now, not super excited. Now, the Giants, those 2 or 3 games against the Giants, now one of those is week 18, so it doesn't help anybody. But at least that helps. And in Washington, that's a good tight end matchup. So in theory, at least Goddard has good matchups. Now, whether they go to him, another story. And then, look, Jalen Hurts, whatever it is this year, and I think it's mostly going from Steichen to Johnson. I really think that Hurts needed certain defined throws in the passing game. I really feel he needed that to be his best version of himself. But because of his running ability, he has 25 or more fantasy points in 11 games, and he's been over 30 on 4 different occasions. So Jalen Hurts probably has been the answer. Him and Josh Allen, right? Now, not this week for Josh Allen, but Jalen Hurts has pretty much been the answer. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes has been fantasy brutal for his draft price. But the only time that Hurts has been under 22 points this week 1 was the Dallas game in week 14. So Jalen Hurts has been the answer. And as long as they keep running him, he'll be that answer until he stops running, because that just doesn't go away. All right, what I want to focus on in these shows this week. Now, normally we just go through risers and fallers in general, but it's the fantasy playoffs. It's one and done. So what I'm going to do is, and I've been doing this on the Sirius XM shows now. My Saturday show, I did the Friday show last week, and I flipped to this format on Friday. We're going to do this on Saturday, similarly with Mario Puig. But I want to go through specific players in certain games that you might have sit questions about. And I'm going to try to give you intel as to how you could frame this. This is also helpful if you're looking at betting props. This is also helpful if you're looking at playing DFS. So whatever mode you're in, this should be helpful. So Bengals-Steelers game. We'll start out with Diontate Johnson, the man who couldn't score a touchdown. He scored in 3 straight games. The game before that was the game when he had the touchdown. It was ruled not a touchdown. He checked out on a play after that. Team really came down on him for that, but he's come back. Here's the problem. Mason Rudolph is at quarterback this week. Now, and I'm going to bring up Pickens as well, okay? Mason Rudolph obviously is a number 3 quarterback. There aren't many number 3 quarterbacks that come in and do well. Now, let's give Mason Rudolph the badge that he's probably the best 3rd-string quarterback in the league. That's not saying much, but it's saying something. I do think against Cincinnati, we're going to see quite a bit of zone. Cam Taylor-Britt, not going to be in. That's one of their top corners. I do think the safe throws are going to be important. I think it's going to be a real important thing here. So safe throws, and that means Diontate Johnson. And against Cincinnati lost DJ Reader. Their run defense hasn't been great, but he's one of their 2 tackles that's great against the run, right? So I think we're looking at this. I think a possession game for Diontate Johnson is fair. He's had 5 to 7 targets in the last 3. I think we could see that go up a little bit. I think this could be a 6 to 8, 6 to 9 target game for him. It's a floor game. His odds of scoring a touchdown are probably in the 25% range. He scored in 3 straight games, but the odds of him getting in the red zone much with Mason Rudolph, a little bit small. So, but Diontate Johnson, I think, would be a PPR floor play this week. I think if you're looking in that wide receiver 3 bucket, wide receiver 30 to 40 in that range, I think you're fair with an understanding with Diontate Johnson. Next, George Pickens. This one worries me because Pickens, you look, I heard a stat, which is accurate. He's only won 28% of those 50-50 balls this year. Last year, he was like near 80%. That's fickle year to year, but nonetheless, it was interesting, right? It was very interesting. But I do worry now because Kenny Pickett was willing to throw it up to him. In the last 2 games for Pickens, we have a 5 for 19 on 6 targets. We have a 3 for 47 on 7 targets. So the targets are there. But now we go to Mason Rudolph. And as much as I tell you that the Cincy pass defense is not good, trusting Mason Rudolph is going to be tough here. And if Pickens is all you've got, you play him. I think the expectation is flex level. I think the expectation is 3 catches for 30 yards. I think that's the expectation. You hope they get in the red zone, and you hope Mason Rudolph throws it up for him. You hope that Pickens catches a short pass and is able to break free for a long gain. These are all things we are hoping for. And that's why as a flex, he's a good flex because he'll get targets, but we're going to need some factors that are going to go beyond Mason Rudolph here. See what I got here. A couple comments here. JAC is saying, should you start Achane or Ekeler next week in 0.7 PPR? Achane made it through the game. There's that. We just saw Dallas get shredded. I do think Dallas could have some real answers for Miami, which might be difficult for them. Ekeler right now, his snap share was down to 40% last week. In a game they trailed. I could see them similarly trailing in this game. So based on that, and Ekeler's struggling. Ekeler is struggling terribly. Actually, I'm going to talk about Ekeler in the next segment. So I'll give you a little more on him. But right now, I'm going to say Achane. And then George, waiver night, pretty big underdog. Do you stick with Stafford or do you pick up Mullins, Lawrence, Mayfield? Lawrence is apparently in the concussion protocol, which is interesting. Mayfield, it was Joe Barry's defense. I love Mayfield. I got him in all my super flex teams. I used him in a lot of leagues last week. But the middle of the field was just ridiculously open. He had a perfect passer rating. The only player to go into Lambeau would never do that, Baker Mayfield. Imagine that, right? Jake Browning, again, he's been getting it done. I got to roll with Stafford. I have to roll with Stafford. Stafford is playing at such an incredible level right now. It's going to be impossible to sit him. Sean McVay is scheming everybody open. His floor is really good. It's a Thursday night game. And here's the thing with New Orleans. New Orleans, much, 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 much better at when they're at home. On the road, that defense often doesn't show up. And the routes that McVay uses receivers on, honestly, the big corners aren't stopping it. And Lattimore's on IR anyway. I don't think Lattimore will be back for this game. So I'm gonna go with Stafford. I'm gonna ride the hot hander. And if one thing, New Orleans is better against the run than they are to pass. So I think that leans to Stafford. I think Stafford's floor is higher than the others. And they're all playing well right now. Browning's been great. Mullins had a 300-yard game. Lawrence had multiple touchdowns in the majority of his recent games. Again, that concussion protocol is problematic. Right now, the steadiness of Stafford makes me stay sick with him. I think there's less chance of having a dud in the fantasy playoffs. All right, let's see here. Next game, Bills-Chargers, and I'll go over that Austin Ekeler one now. So Ekeler, I mentioned last week 40% of the snaps. 5 carries, 9 yards, 4 catches for 29. He did have 100 scrimmage yards 2 weeks ago and a touchdown. There was that. But otherwise, he's struggling to hit 70. In his last 3 games, he has 2 games at less than 40 scrimmage yards. Scored once in the last 4 games. I think this team is in free fall right now. I don't think this is one where they're stepping up for an interim coach. I think this team is deflated with no Justin Herbert. I think that any team that plays them will over-compress the field and say, Easton Stick, you know what? Beat us. Now, he got the lucky touchdown last week to Josh Palmer where the Raiders forgot to cover Palmer, and Palmer got like a 70-something yard touchdown. But I don't think there's going to be any room to run for Ekeler. And the Bills' defense isn't great right now. They played good against Dallas, of course, but Daquan Jones being out for the run defense, but they're going to have bodies. They are going to use bodies to get up there and cram everything. Austin Ekeler's hard to start this week. Austin Ekeler is a flex play this week. PPR league, you might put him in that top 24 equation because he will get targets. He hasn't done a lot with his targets, but those catches pile up. If he gets 5 catches, even if he only gets 40 scrimmage yards, he gets you almost 10 points. So that would make you, for a PPR case, of getting in that top 24-ish range. But if it's half PPR, flex. If it's standard, pray, not so good. Stefon Diggs. All right, last week, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Josh Allen threw 15 passes, completed 7 of them. Diggs goes 4 for 48, gets 5 targets. A third of the targets. But remember this. He did it at 74-yard game and a touchdown about a month ago. But otherwise, he has to sift 50 yards in his last 5 games other than that one game with 74. Right now, passing game not working. The run game is working. The Chargers aren't going to have a lot of answers. But what we saw last week might be reality for this Bills team now. The Bills are preparing to be a playoff team. They're preparing to make a deep run. Now, they got to make the playoffs first, right? But we see it. They are leaning on their running game because defenses will always have to respect Josh Allen, the passing game. They can never say, oh, they're going to run, we're selling out, because the minute the defense starts loading the box, Josh Allen gets turned loose and the defenses are in trouble. So Stefon Diggs, he is a dangerous start because, again, he has not been very useful in 4 of the last 5 games. He is a wide receiver 3 right now. At this time of the year, take the name off the jersey and say, what has number 14 for Buffalo done for me? He hasn't done a lot. And if they get a lead, they're going to run the football. Now, can Diggs be part of the solution that gets into that lead? Yes. But in a 4 or 5 game sample, that hasn't been the case. So he's a wide receiver 3 with upside. That's how you frame him this week. Now, that puts him in most of your starting lineups, but you have to frame the expectations. And I know it's weird because your starting 3 receivers doesn't really matter who they are, but you got to have expectations for players. But that means if you had somebody on your bench and you took their name off the jersey and that player's been producing at a higher level, you need to make a case for him in the fantasy playoffs because Stefon Diggs is not a question of starting your studs. He's not a stud right now. Charlene, welcome back. MA football guys here as well. Welcome everybody who's here. So Stefon Diggs again, just be careful. Colts Falcons. Taylor Heineke's the starter. Drake London. We told you to be careful starting him last week. Why? He was on the road. The home road splits are incredibly night and day for Drake London. Just a microcosm. The last 4 games, they've been road, home, road, home. The 2 road games, 2 for 24, 1 for 8. The 2 home games, 10 for 172, 5 for 91. It has been night and day. The Falcons play much better on their home field. Honestly, Taylor Heineke to Desmond Ridder, flip a coin. Does it really matter? They will get London the ball. In this case, it'll be Heineke. London will get his targets at home. Now, the Colts get pressure. They've gotten much better over the course of the year getting pressure. Really, they were really good at Pittsburgh last week. Versus Pittsburgh, I should say. But the offensive line is good enough in Atlanta. Pass protection is solid enough. So I do think in this case, Drake London, frame him as a high-end wide receiver too. It's a home game. In home games, he cooks. It's been every one. I think maybe the first game it wasn't, but literally it's been like 5 straight games. Money, money, money. So go back to Drake London. Remember, the bad games have been road games. Bijan Robinson, if you started him, which most did, and if you advanced, what do you do with him? 7 carries, 11 yards, 1 catch, 3 yards. He fumbled the ball, and Tyler Algier finished out the game. The prior week, 10 carries, but he did get 7 targets, and he caught 5 for 54, and he scored. So he was fine in that game. Almost 90 scrimmage yards, 5 catches, a touchdown. So just 2 games ago, he was great. Prior week, 21 touches, ends up with about 75-ish yards. So Bijan Robinson, you know where you're drafting him. He's a floor play. He's getting volume. Last week he didn't. He fumbled the ball. Crazy, miserable game. They're at home. They play better at home. Colts defense, weird. The bottom fell out against the run. And then all of a sudden last week against Pittsburgh couldn't even run the ball at all. But they fell behind too. So game scripted out too. So there's that, right? So real interesting there. But I say in this game, you go back to Bijan. They're at home. They play better there. His floor should, again, be solid. I don't think he has a stratospheric ceiling, but he hasn't had many of those games anyway. Let's see. Charlene, Keenan Allen scares you. He should. Buffalo's been great against number 1 receivers this year. And they're not worried about Quentin Johnson. Josh Palmer, again, had the busted coverage. Nobody covered him on the long touchdown last week. That was a freak play. It's not going to happen. They're going to compress the field. They're going to stop Keenan Allen if they can. They're going to stop Austin Ekeler. And they are going to make it miserable with pressure. Keenan Allen, 5 catches, 40 yards, maybe, hopefully. But I would be scared for him because without having Justin Herbert and the threat to stretch the field, It makes it even easier for defenses to game plan against them. And then Michael Pittman, it's a concussion. If the dude clears it, he's fine. Matchup is great. A.J. Terrell, not going to shut down Michael Pittman. Pittman's faced good corners all year. So if Pittman clears the concussion protocol, he's fine. If he doesn't, obviously you don't have a choice. He's going to be out. So, yeah, good one, Charlene, on that. Definitely. All right. Again, we'll have Brandon Kravitz coming in a few minutes here. Seahawks, Titans. I'll go through the rest of the games on Friday. So whatever I don't cover here today, I'll go over the start sits for each game on Friday. So I'll have you covered on those. Also on the XM. I'll be on the XM show Wednesday night, 8 to 10 Eastern. I'll be on there with Nick Whalen, bringing a few guests in, but definitely be talking some football. So if you join me there on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Channel 87, love to see you 8 to 10 tomorrow on Wednesday. Tonight, Tuesday night, 9:30 Eastern, I'll be on the I can't think of the name of the pod, but I'm on a show with Carla and Wendy Early. So that'll be fun. Excited about that. But we'll be talking some football, some life. Be a fun show. All right, Seahawks Titans. I'm a football guy. Should you play Higgins over Adams or Ayuk? You know, Higgins is interesting. He had a 3 for 72 a couple weeks ago. Now, last week he came up with the touchdowns. Great one late in the game. If Chase is out, he's going to see targets. He is going to see targets. He probably sees 10 targets. Steelers, Joey Porter's a smaller dude. He's playing real well. He plays better in the slot. Patrick Peterson, they play zone. I would start Higgins over Higgins. See, here's the thing with Ayuk. When you drafted Ayuk, here was the deal. You knew there'd be weeks he wasn't going to get the ball, but you knew you wouldn't know when those weeks would come. You knew he had upside. Any week he could go off. Nothing's changed. His situation has not changed when you drafted him. So, and there's never a rhyme or reason when he has the big game. Diontate Adams had a great game last week when he was sick. So at this point, Adams is going to get his 10-plus targets. Pittman disappears. We've seen it throughout this time of Burrow. He disappears. He's played without Chase and not always done well. I would be inclined to certainly start Adams, and I would be inclined to start Ayuk. Now, I had questions about the Indy backfield. Zach Moss says he's playing this week. There's that. So that's enough. Jonathan Taylor apparently has a really good chance to play. I think the team expects him back this week. So Trey Sermon came up with that game, but Trey Sermon split the snaps. It was interesting. Now why is it backup running back who he shared with Goodson? Was it Tyler Goodson? I think it was Tyler Goodson. So this is a late in the week question because I think Taylor's back and I think Moss is back and I think the other running backs are irrelevant. That's what I think. Pittsburgh on defense against them last week. I can't tell you what happened. Cannot tell you what happened. Completely checked out. It was not working for them. Let's see what we got here. CMC is Brock hands down favorite. Yep. CMC is the man. If there was a real MVP, not a quarterback-based award, I don't know how he doesn't win it. And love Tyreek Hill and what he's done. But Christian McCaffrey's a rare cat. And Charlene, should you start Walker or Hubbard? Well, Walker is at Tennessee. Jeffrey Simmons is probably out again. They let go of Tyler Tart. They got shredded on the ground by Devin Singletary. I got to say Ken Walker because I think he gets similar volume to Hubbard. Walker has a better chance to break a big play. Pete Carroll wants to lean on that running game. They both are great volume plays, but I'm going to go to the talent here. I'm going to trust the talent to Walker. Walker showed it last night. That dude is talented. He's healthy now, and that's the big deal. Kenneth Walker's healthy. When he's not healthy, doesn't play great. That's not an obvious statement either. There are some players that when they're hurt, they play at their similar level. But Kenneth Walker, not so much. Brandon Kravitz, we are in the fantasy football playoffs. Exciting time of year. Brandon, how are things?
Pretty good. I actually advanced last night in a nail biter because of that deep pass down the sideline to DK Metcalf. So it was a late night for me here on the East Coast. Just trying to make my way through the fantasy postseason, but so far so good.
So the last time you'll be on this year, because waivers are obviously not much of a thing. This is like semifinal week, and after that, there's really not much left. So, Brandon's been a great season working with you. Hopefully, we work out something next year and figure out how to work together again. But it's been wonderful having you on the show. Do you want to give us some waivers for our quarterback?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with Baker Mayfield. I've seen him out there in some leagues. This guy is dealing right now. 7 touchdowns in the past 3 weeks. And we know he's got top targets to throw to like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I like what I'm seeing from Cade Otton. We'll talk about him in a minute. If for whatever reason you're in a more desperate situation, because Baker Mayfield, depending on the site that you look, is like probably hovering around 60 to 70% rostered right now. I think Nick Mullins could be interesting. He's in a dome against the Lions, a defense that can be had through the air, and he's got elite weapons to throw the ball to, like the fact that we're getting a healthy Justin Jefferson back out there.
And that offensive line in Minnesota, nobody's talking about them, Brandon. They are near the top of the league, not just pass blocking, run blocking, but for Mullins, having that pass protection. And like you said, those elite weapons in a game that has a great chance of shooting out, Mullins is a great call. Mayfield, it was funny, Brandon, because I all my super flex leagues, Mayfield was my third quarterback, drafted him. But I was at the live Scott Fishbowl draft in Chicago and sitting in the room of people. And I had to make a public comment before I took Baker Mayfield, almost like to excuse myself. Say, I get it, but hold my nose here. But I need a quarterback, and I think he'll be okay. He ended up being okay. I got lucky on that one. But, yes, love Baker Mayfield. And Brandon also told you Nick Mullins is an option. Brandon, who do you like at running back this week?
Yeah, that Nick Mullins one, really more of a super flex option. I'm not trying to start him in 12-team leagues with single quarterbacks. But let's look at Ty Chandler. If we like that offensive line for the Minnesota Vikings, why not their new starting running back? Not sure exactly what the status of Alexander Madison is going into this week, but man, they should just keep feeding Ty Chandler. He's the best running back they've got. First career start for him, 23 carries, 132 yards, and a touchdown. He looked really good. I expect them to keep feeding him. Trey Sermon, Tyler Goodson, those guys platooned when Zach Moss missed time. If those guys are out there and we don't get any positive news on Jonathan Taylor or Zach Moss, they could both be worth a look. But to me, the most added name in fantasy this week has to be that of Justice Hill. Brutal what happened to Keaton Mitchell. But this is an opportunity in fantasy. Justice Hill is a speedster, Jim, and you know this. He can pass protect. That was the one thing that Keaton Mitchell couldn't do. So the fact that he's going to take over Keaton Mitchell's role, retain his own role, and he's good in pass pro, this is a guy that's going to be on the field a lot moving forward.
Yes, and it'd be funny. I want to see him pass protecting that 49ers game. And you're right about it, 100% not arguing, but he's going to get his rear end handed to him by Nick Bosa and the boys. I'm all into the 49ers. That has nothing to do with your call. Hill's a great call. He should get some receptions in that game as well. Love that call. MA Football Guys, a question directly for you, obviously the quarterbacks. Should he grab Baker over Dak against Miami coming off a stinker?
Yeah, I know that was frustrating. I've actually got eliminated in a league because Dak decided not to show up in Buffalo. But even if I was still alive there, I would still roll Dak Prescott out as my starting quarterback. Baker's been nice, but Dak Prescott, outside of what you saw last week, has been playing as good as anybody at the quarterback position. I would expect this to be a high-scoring game. I know Miami's defense has played better, but that was just a bad spot. Buffalo, it was freezing cold there. The Cowboys had been at home for a month. Much different situation. There are going to be a ton of Cowboys fans at this Dolphins game because it's such a transient town. So I would not over panic on Dak Prescott. I would expect a strong bounce back from him.
And one last thing, Miami plays a zone where they give you a lot of underneath stuff, and that's where they operate. That's a lot of CD Lamb. That's a lot of Jake Ferguson. That's not Brandon Cooks, but the two best players in the passing game, they do fit well with the Miami. So I love that call on that, Brandon. Stick with Dak, even though he laid the stinker in week 15, 14. I can't even.
15.
My weeks are all screwed up now. All right, wide receiver. Give us about 4 good options here this week.
Yeah, and there's even more than that if you were scouring, but we don't want to overwhelm you with names, especially when you really don't want to start any of these guys, but if you're in a situation where you need to, Noah Brown has stepped up in the absence of Tank Dell. Nico Collins missed last week. I think CJ Stroud should be able to play. I mean, I'm not a concussion specialist, but he missed 1 week. I'd be surprised if he missed another. We've just seen guys come back quickly this year from that sort of injury. And the Browns defense that he goes up against is not the same on the road as they are at home. A completely different unit there. Browns, or Noah Brown, rather, with a couple of games now where he's gone over 150 yards receiving. So his ceiling is sky high with CJ Stroud. That actually is a guy that I would feel good about starting, especially if Nico Collins doesn't play. Josh Palmer, he was forced to step up as the number one for the Chargers. If I'm the Chargers, I'm just shutting down Keenan Allen for the rest of the year, but that's my opinion. And if that happens, Josh Palmer becomes the number one wide receiver over the century mark against the Raiders. Was it garbage time? Yes. Do I expect more garbage time this week against Buffalo? Also, yes.
Yes.
And then I'll wrap with Tyler Boyd and Trenton Irwin. And it really comes down to the availability of these guys. Tyler Boyd's the one you want, definitely in PPR leagues, but no Jamar Chase for a couple of weeks, it looks like. There's going to be a lot of targets to go around in that offense.
All right. Quick question from George for you before we get to the tight ends. It's DraftKings scoring system need 2. Cup. Oh, we got to get the opponents on these, though. George, put the opponents in. It's too early in the week. Put the opponents for each time. We'll answer for you after the tight ends.
I love how much you struggle with that. I feel like I've always felt like I'm on a fantasy island over here. Like I'm just not ready to answer those questions on a Tuesday. But yeah, I mean, I start looking at the schedule. I always want to get a good idea of the line movement and all of that early in the week, but it doesn't stick until like Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it totally good. The life of a fantasy analyst. All right, give us a couple of good tight ends for this week, Brandon.
Yeah, I've had my eye on Tyler Higbee for a couple of weeks now. We saw his backup, Davis Allen, go off, and now Tyler Higbee is back. Stafford's locked in right now. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, they're opening things up for tight ends in that offense. You look at last week, he wasn't impressive. 4 catches, 36 yards, but that's the nature of the tight end position. These guys aren't going to be monsters every single week unless you're Sam Laporta. Also, if we love Baker Mayfield, we ought to love Cade Otton. He's been getting more involved in this offense over the last month, and the Jaguars ranked 29th against tight ends, so he's the perfect streamer this week.
And yeah, you know, when you mentioned Tyler Higbee, people always think of the Saints as the shutdown defense against tight ends. Not this year. And you were kind of intimating that as well. So, yeah, Higbee's a great opportunity. I love Otton as well. How about a defense special team?
Yeah, let's not. I don't like to overthink the defenses. Let's just pluck the low-hanging fruit. How about the Denver Broncos? The Patriots can't seem to figure anything out offensively. They have no consistency. They were moving the ball at will in the first half against the Chiefs, did not continue into the second half. You're going to get a Broncos team here that just got embarrassed by the Lions, so I would expect things to get rather ugly in Denver for that Patriots offense.
Yes, and man, speaking of the Broncos, man, Sean Payton was reaming out Russell Wilson on national television. That was a spectacle, Brandon. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think Sean Payton is realizing what we all knew, that his quarterback is a big lead boot to his career in Denver, and he's not going to go very far. He knows that the ceiling is capped with Russell Wilson as his quarterback, and I think you're seeing some of that frustration spill over because his cap situation is not friendly. The Denver Broncos are going to have to get really creative if they want to move off of that Wilson contract. I think Sean Payton is realizing that he may have bit off more than he could chew.
Man. All right, well, George's question now we'll give opponents. So first of all, Cooper Kupp is playing New Orleans. We'll talk about Mike Evans against Jacksonville and then Garrett Wilson against Washington. Cooper Kupp against New Orleans. Do you think it's a big game, a mediocre game, or is it a down game for him?
For Cooper Kupp, he's so matchup proof. I'm not even really worried about that. I would sense a medium level game. I would look at Mike Evans. That's the one that really stands out to me. He and Baker Mayfield are absolutely clicking right now. You're basically guaranteeing yourself at least a touchdown when you lean on Mike Evans. And that Jaguars defense seems to be slipping off a little bit. Tyson Campbell's been dealing with injuries. Garrett Wilson is, in this situation, not playable. And even in seasonal formats, yes. I'm looking to get away from him. I just can't deal with this Jets offense anymore. Zach Wilson, is just so bad. And there's really and Garrett Wilson, I think, is at a point of frustration where like there's no way this guy's giving 100% effort anymore. I don't want my fantasy season to rely on the acumen of Zach Wilson.
And then Randy asked what the Rams do with Demarcus Robinson. Now the Tutu will be back. Remember, Demarcus Robinson was seeing 60% of the snaps when Atwell was healthy. He's been 4 straight weeks. When Atwell was out, then we saw Robinson go up to the 80% range to offset Atwell being out. Robinson scored in 3 straight games. He's getting targeted. And here's the whole point I'm making. We know who Demarcus Robinson is. He's not a good football player. But Sean McVay is scheming his players open regularly, and defenses have to worry about Kupp and Nacua. They're not even thinking about Demarcus Robinson. So he's always going to have a low floor because he could not show up at any week. But he's going to retain that 60% snap share that he had. Any thoughts on that, Brandon?
Yeah, and I do like Demarcus Robinson too, because I think he's a threat in the red zone where Tutu Atwell really wasn't. Demarcus Robinson is a great vertical leap. It's probably the thing that is most special about him. So he can go for those 50-50 balls in the end zone.
And then last one, and then we'll get you out of here. Adam asks, with the Kyler Stafford discussion, who you got? Look, the Bears are at home this week, and I remember this one against Kyler. The Bears defense is playing at an extremely high level for the last month. And I know Joe Flacco got him late. I get it. They have been playing great. And at home, they're even better. I think Kyler is a complete fade this week. Any thoughts on that?
And even more than that, I think Stafford is a complete lean in. He's a guy right now. I mentioned how locked in he seems. Got great wide receivers to throw the ball to. The Rams are one of those teams kind of tracking as an NFC squad that you don't want to face in the playoffs. And Stafford's the biggest reason why. He's a real legitimate NFL quarterback. We know that, but he's playing at the top of his game right now. I want pieces of that Rams offense. You said you have Kyren Williams. I mean, you're going to guarantee yourself some production with those two guys in your lineup.
Brandon, it's been a wonderful season with you on Tuesdays. Again, this is Brandon's last show with us. We'll have him back in the preseason, and then we'll figure out something for the regular season. Brandon, tell everybody to keep up with you all off season.
At Brandon Kravitz, you can find me across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I do a daily Fantasy Bites podcast for the RotoWire network. That's 5 minutes or less. Everything you need to know. NFL season, NBA season, Major League Baseball when that rolls back around as well. And if you ever find yourself in the Orlando area or you want to stream me on the iHeartRadio app, just search for 96.9 The Game. I'm live 3 hours a day, 5 days a week from 3 to 6 p.m. It's been an absolute pleasure, Jim. I look up to you as one of the most knowledgeable people in the fantasy industry. And I think that your opinion and analysis really carries a lot of weight. The fact that you have asked me to be a part of this truly meant a lot. And Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year. And I definitely hope we can do this in the future.
Dude, I got goosebumps. Thank you. Those are very kind words. Merry Christmas. I appreciate you. Everybody, we're off Wednesday and Thursday. Friday, we come back with a gambling show. We will also go back to cover the rest of the games about players who are going to be dicey start-sit questions. We'll cover all of those for you. XM, Fantasy Sports Channel 87, Wednesday night, 8 to 10 Eastern. I'll be on. Usual drill with that. For Brandon Kravitz, I'm Jim Coventry. Everybody have a wonderful rest of the day.